All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've had multiple committees going on today. But thank you. Let's see, I want to come to Mr. Vitello first, if I may, with my question. We have the migrant protection protocols that the president put into place, that President Trump had put into place, seemed to be doing a good job of helping to secure things at the southern border and closing those catch and release loopholes. We found that we had a more secure border. What I'd like to ask you is what you saw on the border as the difference that those migrant protection protocols made, and the difference that we saw in 2019 and 2020 as to what we are seeing today at the southern border.
So the protocols were important in a number of ways. It does, like you said, close the loophole in the immigration framework. It allows people to petition to go to immigration court and have an asylum hearing. But instead of waiting in the United States with a notice to appear, we made an agreement with Mexico so that people could wait in Mexico to have those hearings. And so what that does is it kind of closes the loop. It says to people, look, if you're going to make this dangerous journey only to be stopped at the border and left in Mexico to wait, then you're not going to send for family members. You're not going to send for cousins, aunts, and uncles. You're not going to encourage other people to make that trek, which is very dangerous. And they're at great risk in that pipeline. And so the migrant protection protocols close the loop, if you will. And also, there was also pressure put on Mexico in an effective way in which they deployed on their southern border about 25,000 National Guard troops to help protect their border environment with Guatemala. And then they put, first time I'd ever seen it in my career, they put troops near our border on the northern border to make sure that the smugglers didn't mass these large groups right at the immediate border, send them across to distract the Border Patrol, like Senator Cornyn talked about. That way the cartels would take advantage of numbers of agents being held to help protect these hundreds of people, and while the cartels run wild everywhere else in the border. And so it wasn't just the agreement, which is historic as it was, but the active response by Mexico to help fully implement it.
I have to tell you, being on the border in Arizona and seeing firsthand the sophistication of the cartels, and I've been going to the border now for over a decade, and it seems like the most challenging situation that I have ever seen at the border because the cartels are sophisticated. They have surveillance that they are running 24/7. They are surveilling our law enforcement officers and our local law enforcement. This just creates so much pressure on doing their job. And then as you look at the fentanyl and the meth that the cartels are pushing into this country over the areas where they're circumventing our border patrol, and they're working around them. So I think this really creates an added pressure for our law enforcement, and we have turned those migrant protection protocols into legislation that we are going to move forward to. I want to ask you about one more issue, and that is the illegal immigrants that are in our country because they overstay their visas. And we have looked at this issue and discussed it for years, that there need to be reforms to tighten this up so that once individuals have reached the end of the time that they can stay here in this country, that they exit the country. So what is your advice on reforms that need to be done to address this issue of overstaying visas?
Well, there's probably stuff to do on the legislative side as it relates to penalties for people who overstay. I think that's addressed in the legislation that we're talking about today. But CBP has, since the 9/11 Commission report, been working on figuring out how to recognize people who come to the United States on a visa, whether they left or not. It was very difficult to do. But the technology and the aspiration to get it done has improved. And so CBP now has in airports, international airports all over the country, a biometric exit verification. So when someone comes through on a visa and they exit as they're supposed to, then that record gets filed into the system and everybody knows, the government knows that that person didn't overstay their visa. But then there's lots of people who are coming across the land borders and that system is not yet in place. And so there's still some work to be done, if you will, in verifying exits at the land border. But that's the kind of thing that needs to be done to secure and make sure that those visas are used as they're designed, right? So this person comes and applied for a visa. That's a contract with the United States to come in and comply with terms. And then they're also screened at the border, and they affirm that they're going to use that visa for its intention. But then they go back on their word, if you will, and they have two bites at the apple, if you will, to tell the government that they could be trustworthy under that scenario. And so verifying exit and maybe additional penalties for people who find themselves in that situation.
Well, thank you for that insight. And this is an issue we're going to work on, just as with turning the migrant protection protocols into legislation and pushing for that passage. We had a safer, more secure border and a better, safer work environment for our Border Patrol and our ICE officers when we had those in place. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.